During a routine power outage, a 6-year-old girl vanished from her own bedroom without opening a door or window. Weeks later, her mother found something hidden inside the air vent. A dollhouse, hand-carved from wood. Every room matched their real home, and in the smallest bedroom was a doll wearing the missing child's pajamas. Before we unlock what was hidden behind the walls, make sure to subscribe for more real-life mysteries, cold cases, and forgotten horrors like this one. The storm knocked the power out at exactly 9:16 p.m. Wind screamed through the trees outside the Holloway home, bending their limbs like broken arms. Somewhere down the block, a transformer blew. Lights flickered. The television cut to black. Rachel Holloway lit a candle in the hallway and made her way toward her daughter's room, whispering Clara's name. No answer. The door was open. The window was shut, and the bed was empty. No footprints, no forced entry, no sound. Just one thing left behind. Her favorite blanket curled in the corner, and the faint smell of cedar, like an old attic. The search lasted 7 weeks, but they were looking in the wrong places. Because Clara hadn't been taken outside the house, she'd been hidden inside it. The storm rolled in without warning. Thunder cracked like a whip across the gray afternoon sky, and within seconds, rain came in sheets, hammering the old window panes of the Holloway house. A gust of wind sent the swing in the backyard creaking sideways. It twisted, and then snapped to a stop, facing the house. Inside, the lights flickered once, twice, and died. Rachel Holloway stood motionless in the hallway, laundry basket in her arms, listening as silence filled the house like water rising in a sealed room. The hum of appliances disappeared. The white noise of life, the refrigerator, the AC vents, Clara's cartoons upstairs, vanished in an instant. She felt it in her chest before she registered the silence. A shift, a change. "Thomas," she called. Her voice seemed too loud, like it didn't belong in this house. No answer. The house was old. Built in 1910, restored in pieces, never truly finished. They'd bought it 3 months ago. Cheap, off-market, too many cosmetic quirks, and a seller who'd moved out overnight. Still, it was what they could afford. Big yard, a room for Clara, a room for the baby they might one day have. Thomas had called it a long-term fixer. Rachel had said it had charm. Now, in the deepening dim, it felt like a mouth closed tight. She set the laundry basket on the hallway bench and walked toward the stairs. The storm flashed through the windows, trees swaying, wind lashing sideways. Rain hissed against the siding like steam. From upstairs, she heard the unmistakable sound of a vent rattling. Not violently, just a soft knock, 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 like something brushing the inside of a duct. She paused. The vent outside Clara's room had been doing that lately. Something loose inside the ductwork, Thomas said. Probably a raccoon or a squirrel that died and got stuck. He'd promised to crawl into the crawl space that weekend and check. The knocking came again, then stopped. She climbed the stairs slowly. Each creak of the wooden steps felt louder without the white noise of electronics to drown them out. "Clara?" she called softly, just in case the storm had frightened her. Her daughter didn't answer. Rachel moved down the hallway, passing the linen closet, the guest room, then finally Clara's door. The hand-painted wooden letters still hung proudly across it, CLARA, in pastel pinks and purples. Rachel's fingers hesitated on the knob. She pushed the door open. "Clara?" Nothing. The bedroom was dim but not dark. Enough gray light filtered in from the storm for Rachel to see clearly. The bed was empty. The sheets were rumpled like someone had just left. Clara's slippers sat at the foot of the mattress. The old bunny doll, Miss April, lay sideways on the pillow, ears askew. The closet door was shut. The small bookshelf was undisturbed, but Clara was not there. A rush of something cold ran down Rachel's arms. She crossed the room quickly and checked the closet. Empty. "Clara!" she called again, louder now, stepping back into the hallway. "Clara!" She searched the upstairs in a blur. Guest bathroom, empty. Office, empty. Master bedroom, empty. Panic rose like bile. Rachel bounded down the stairs, heart thudding now. "Thomas!" He stepped into view from the mudroom, drenched, holding a flashlight and 2 batteries. "Power's out. Transformer probably blew. I heard it pop just before the lights went." "She's not in her room." "What?" "Clara's not upstairs. I've checked everywhere. Rachel's voice cracked as she said it, because it was real now. Thomas set the flashlight on the counter and moved quickly. "Did you check the basement? Maybe she went down to play." "She doesn't go down there alone." Together they tore through the house, first the living room, then the kitchen, calling her name over and over. Rachel threw open the coat closet. Thomas ran to the back porch and scanned the yard through the rain. Nothing. Rachel's breathing came fast and shallow. She was just watching TV an hour ago. She said she was tired, so I told her to go lie down. She took Miss April and went upstairs. She must be hiding. They tore apart the house again, this time with less restraint. Cabinets, laundry baskets behind the drapes. Rachel opened every drawer in the dining room, unsure what she was even hoping to find. Thunder shook the glass in the windows. When Thomas returned from the backyard, soaked and shivering, his expression was different. Blank, like something inside him had flipped off. "We need to call someone." Rachel was already dialing. The police arrived in less than 20 minutes. First a cruiser, then 2 more. An officer named Alvarez led the initial response. Calm, concise, but Rachel could see something change in his face too as they explained the situation. "No signs of forced entry." "No." "Nothing broken?" "No." "Doors locked?" "Yes." "Any pets? Animals in the house?" "No." "Clara's last known time seen, approximately 3:10 p.m. Discovery of her absence, 3:44 p.m. 911 call placed, 3:46 p.m. The storm continued as officers canvassed the house. K-9 units arrived an hour later and began sniffing the perimeter. They followed Clara's scent to the vent just beneath her bedroom window and lost it. Rachel stood with an officer under the carport, drenched, arms wrapped around herself, watching a police dog whimper and turn in circles. "Could she have wandered out on her own?" the officer asked gently. "Number, she's afraid of storms. She wouldn't even open a window when it rains." The duct cover was intact, not disturbed, but the scent stopped there. Inside, officers moved carefully through the home, shining lights into every crawl space, attic beam, basement corner. They knocked on walls, measured vents, lifted floorboards. They found nothing. No sign of struggle, no blood, no fingerprints, no forced entry. Just a child-sized bed, rumpled, a stuffed animal lying face down, and one small t-shirt, striped blue and teal, folded neatly at the foot of the stairs, damp as if someone had touched it with wet hands. By nightfall, the house was sealed with crime scene tape. Clara's room was treated as a sealed scene. Officers questioned the neighbors. Rachel answered everything, over and over again, her voice becoming more distant each time. Thomas stopped talking entirely. At 11:24 p.m., Officer Alvarez stood in the foyer, soaked and exhausted, and said quietly, "If she's still in this house, we would have found her." Rachel sat on the stairs. Miss April clutched to her chest and stared through the rain at the flickering porch light. It had come back on when the power returned, but everything else felt dark. Clara had vanished. No footprints, no sounds, no goodbye. Just silence and the thumping of an old vent in the wall, steady and deliberate like something remembering. The next morning came heavy and gray. Rain still hung in the air, soft now, like the sky itself was exhausted. The storm had moved on, but its shadow remained. The Holloway house sat still behind yellow police tape, windows dark, blinds drawn. A cruiser idled outside. Inside, nothing moved. Rachel Holloway hadn't slept. She sat in the kitchen, arms wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Her fingers trembled against the ceramic, more from absence than fatigue. The silence was unbearable. A silence shaped like Clara. The house no longer felt like home. It felt hollow, as if something had been carved out of it. Rachel could still smell her daughter's shampoo in the air, could still see her rain boots by the door. But none of it made sense. Thomas sat across from her at the table, jaw clenched, unmoving. He hadn't spoken since late the night before, only nodded when Alvarez said they'd be back at first light, only stared at the floor when Rachel said, "I can't breathe," through shaking sobs. Outside, the driveway filled with people, police, detectives, crime scene techs. A mobile command van parked near the curb, its satellite dish already deployed. Officers brought equipment, dogs, more cameras, and a new face. Detective Lena Briggs, mid-40s, sharp gray suit under a dark trench coat. Her hair was tied back. Her eyes were dark and fast-moving. She introduced herself to Rachel with a handshake that was firm but not cold. "I know you've told your story more times than you can count," Briggs said gently, "but I need to ask you again. Small details can matter. Things that didn't seem strange yesterday might stand out now." Rachel nodded. She would say it 100 times if it brought her daughter back. They sat in the living room while Thomas remained at the kitchen table, silent and unmoving. Officer Alvarez stood nearby, taking notes. Briggs's voice stayed calm and neutral. "What did Clara say the last time you saw her?" "She said she was tired. She was watching a cartoon, something with animals. She asked if she could go lie down." "Did you walk her to her room?" She went upstairs alone. I folded laundry. I was going to bring her socks in a few minutes. And the next time you checked, it was quiet. Too quiet. The lights had gone out. I thought she was just napping, but her bed was empty. No Clara. Briggs scribbled something in her notebook. And the front and back doors? Locked. Windows too. She had no reason to leave. She wasn't scared of storms. She was terrified of storms. She always closed the curtains and hid under the covers. Briggs nodded again, eyes scanning the room slowly. Rachel wanted to scream, wanting someone to just do something. But Briggs had the look of someone watching a puzzle assemble in real time, quiet, purposeful. "Have you searched the HVAC system?" Rachel blinked. "What?" "The ducts, the vents. The police looked everywhere." "Yes, but not inside every line. Some of these older houses have disused passageways, ducts that no longer connect to anything but were never sealed. Crawlspace architecture in houses like this is unpredictable." Thomas's voice broke the silence. "There's an access panel behind the laundry machines." Rachel turned toward him, surprised. He didn't meet her eyes. "Show me," Briggs said. Downstairs, the laundry room was dim and cold. A single exposed bulb flickered overhead. Behind the stacked washer and dryer, just above the baseboard, was a square metal panel, screwed in at all four corners. Rachel had never noticed it. Briggs crouched. "Anyone been in here since yesterday?" "No," Thomas said. She put on gloves. "Alvarez." The officer handed her a multi-bit screwdriver. In less than 2 minutes, Briggs had the panel off. She aimed her flashlight inside. The duct beyond was large, wider than expected. Sheet metal lining, dust-coated edges, but no visible obstruction. "What's that?" she murmured. Rachel leaned closer. A stuffed animal. Miss April, the one that had been on Clara's pillow the day before. But this one was clean, perfect, untouched. No matted fur, no crayon marks on the ear, just like it had been the day they bought it. Rachel felt the floor slide beneath her. "That's not possible," she whispered. "The real one is upstairs. I was holding it last night." Briggs reached inside, carefully extracting the toy. It was cool to the touch. Her fingers pinched something small from its collar. A single thread. Pink. "Bag it," she said to Alvarez. "Then, we'll need duct scopes. Thermal readers. If there's something back there, I want to see it." For the next 3 hours, the house became a machine of investigation. Cables ran through vents. Cameras were snaked through ducts. Infrared devices swept behind walls. And still, no signs of Clara. Nothing but dead ends, narrow tunnels, insulated lines leading nowhere. Rachel sat numbly on the couch while a crime scene tech emerged from the vent in Clara's room, shaking his head. "No physical evidence," he said to Briggs. "No fingerprints, no blood, no hair, not even dust disturbed." "So she didn't crawl in," Briggs said. "She was placed." Rachel's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" "I mean someone had access. Someone small enough or careful enough to move without trace, or someone who knows this house better than we do." Rachel's mind reeled. "You think someone was already here?" Briggs didn't answer. Instead, she asked, "Has anything else gone missing? Objects, furniture moved, items out of place?" Rachel shook her head. Nothing's changed. Everything's where it was, except your daughter." That afternoon, the Holloways were asked to leave the house temporarily so a forensic team could do a full Luma analysis. Lights, ultraviolet, moisture, acoustic. Anything that could reveal disturbed insulation, altered airflow, recent contact. Rachel didn't want to leave, but Thomas had already packed a bag, booked a room at the local inn near the station. He didn't say a word when Rachel climbed into the car with him. The moment the engine started, Rachel turned toward him. "Why didn't you tell me about that vent?" He didn't answer. "You knew it was there. You told Briggs. Why didn't you tell me?" Thomas stared at the road, hands gripping the wheel. His mouth opened once, closed, then, "I forgot." "No, you didn't." "I didn't think it mattered." Rachel looked away. The town blurred past in soft motion. It mattered. Everything mattered now. At the motel, the room was small and quiet. Too quiet. Rachel couldn't stop checking the corners, listening to the walls. She thought about the stuffed animal in the duct. Clean, perfect, untouched. Not a single dog hair, not a single speck of dust. It wasn't just Clara that had disappeared. Something else had taken her place. That night at 2:07 a.m., Rachel awoke to a sound, a faint clatter, like small wooden feet hitting the floor. She sat up slowly. Across the room, the dresser drawer stood slightly open, just enough to reveal a shape. Rachel got out of bed and moved across the room, heart pounding. Inside the drawer was a doll, cloth body, plastic face, hand-stitched dress, and on its feet, the same rain boots Clara had worn the day she vanished. The motel room felt colder than it had any right to. Rachel stood in front of the open dresser drawer, arms trembling as she stared down at the doll. The face was cracked, plastic yellowed with age, but the clothing, Clara's clothing, was unmistakable. The rain boots were polka-dotted red. Clara had picked them out herself last fall. Rachel remembered the way she stomped in puddles just to watch the water fly. These boots had her daughter's name written in Sharpie on the inner lining. Rachel reached down with cautious fingers. The boots were too small to be real. They were miniature, an exact replica, but scaled for a doll. She backed away, heart thudding like fists behind her ribs. Thomas stirred behind her. "Rach, what is it?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. He got out of bed, walked over in boxers and a t-shirt, rubbing his eyes. When he saw the doll, he stopped. "What the hell is that?" Rachel turned to him. "You tell me." His face remained blank. "I didn't put that there." You think I did? No, He hesitated. Maybe the police brought it in for evidence. They didn't. Then maybe it was already in the drawer, Rachel snapped. I packed the drawers. I checked everything when we got here. There was nothing in that dresser last night. She turned back to the doll. The stitching on the dress was hand-done. Neat, even. The thread used to hem the bottom was a dull pink, frayed in one corner, as if chewed by age or teeth. The buttons down the back were made of carved wood. Rachel lifted the doll. It was heavier than it looked. Inside the fabric body, something hard shifted. A weight. She flipped it over. A slit in the stitching had been re-sewn, but crudely, like someone had cut the doll open and then stitched it back shut with shaking hands. Thomas leaned in. Wait, something's in there. Rachel didn't hesitate. She grabbed a nail file from her purse and slid the edge under the stitch, prying it open thread by thread. The moment the seam gave way, something slid out onto the dresser top. A cassette tape. Red plastic. No label. No case. Just a single tape. Small and unassuming. Rachel stared at it. Where the hell did this come from? Thomas stepped back. We need to call Briggs. Detective Briggs returned to the motel within the hour. She didn't speak much when she entered, just examined the doll, the boots, and the tape with a kind of focused intensity that Rachel had already come to recognize. Briggs handled the items with gloves, placed them into separate evidence bags, then turned to the Holloways. Where did you find this? In the drawer, Rachel said. I heard a noise, like it fell. I didn't put it there. Neither did Thomas. Were the police in your room? No. Briggs nodded to herself. We'll scan the motel cameras, but I have a feeling they won't show much. What does that mean? Rachel asked. Briggs hesitated. I need to ask, has anyone lived in the Holloway house before you who might still have access? A key, a crawl space entrance. Someone who might have spent a long time in the structure unnoticed? Rachel's blood chilled. We bought it from a flipper. He never lived there. Just gutted and sold it. And before that? I don't know. The realtor was vague. Said it was vacant a long time. Briggs tapped her pen against the edge of her notebook. Houses that sit empty can become something else. A person who spends enough time hidden inside a space can learn it better than the owner. They don't need to break in if they never left. Rachel stared at her. You're saying someone could be living in the walls? I'm saying we've seen it before. Later that morning, Briggs had the tape transferred and digitized. Rachel and Thomas sat with her at the station as the playback began. A low hum filled the speaker, blank air, static, the faint pop of something electric in the background. Then a child's voice. Rachel's spine straightened. My name is Clara Holloway. I'm 7 years old. Thomas let out a sound, half sob, half gasp. Clara's voice was shaky. Not crying, but close. If you're hearing this, it means I didn't get out. I tried. I knocked and called, but nobody heard. There's no way out except when he comes. Rachel's mouth went dry. He watches me from the walls. He said I belong to the house now. He brings me food. Sometimes he talks. Sometimes he's just quiet. I don't like it when he's quiet. The static deepened. He made the dollhouse for me. Said it's like a map. But it's not just rooms. It has people. United States, me, Mommy, even Miss April. He keeps saying I'll like it better than outside. That outside lies, that you forgot me. The tape clicked and ended. Rachel couldn't speak, couldn't cry. She could only sit there, cold as stone, her hand over her mouth. Briggs leaned forward. She's alive. Thomas slumped forward in his chair, hands on his face. Briggs continued. And whoever this person is, they're using the HVAC, the ducts, maybe even structural voids. If that doll showed up at your motel, they may have access here too. The tape, he wanted you to hear it. Why? Rachel asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Briggs looked straight at her. Because it's a warning. He doesn't think you'll stop looking. He's telling you where to find her if you play by his rules. Rachel didn't sleep that night. Not really. She lay in the motel bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it creaked in lazy circles. Her eyes burned from exhaustion, but she couldn't shut them, not after hearing Clara's voice. Clara had been scared, but not broken. She was still trying. That thought both comforted and destroyed Rachel. Thomas slept fitfully beside her. Every hour or so he muttered something. Rachel, Clara. Stop. But never woke. Sometime after 4 a.m., Rachel got out of bed and sat at the table with a pad of motel stationery. She began drawing from memory. The layout of the house, Clara's room, the hall, the laundry vent. Then, from what she'd seen of the dollhouse, the rooms Clara had described in her drawings. A basement that didn't exist. A hallway that turned where theirs didn't. A narrow crawl space that ran beneath the staircase. She didn't know what it meant yet, but she felt it. The house had a map she hadn't seen. Back at the Holloway house the next morning, officers were sweeping the HVAC system again, this time with fiber optic cameras. Briggs had ordered structural specialists, forensic architects, even a city inspector. The original blueprints were gone. Town Hall had no digital scans. The house had been modified too many times over too many decades to know what still remained behind the walls. Rachel stood in Clara's room again, this time alone. The furniture was as they'd left it. The sheets on the bed were still rumpled from the day she disappeared. Miss April, the original, sat in the corner, one eye loose, one ear stained. Rachel walked to the vent beneath the window. It was too small for a child to crawl through, but not too small for someone to pull a child in. She crouched, listened. Static. The faintest hum, like the sound of an old television left on in another room. She leaned closer. Her hand brushed the vent cover. It was cold, too cold. As she reached to touch the screws, something tapped from inside the duct, 3 times. Then silence. Rachel backed away slowly. The static returned, steady now, a whisper riding just underneath it. Not a word, not a name, just breathing. Rachel didn't tell anyone about the tapping. Not yet. She stood in Clara's room for nearly 15 minutes after it happened, waiting for it to repeat. It didn't. The vent was still, silent, cold, just a rectangular opening sealed with a metal grate, aged brass, worn around the screw heads. She knelt again, slowly this time, and pressed her hand against the cover. It wasn't cold anymore. It was warm, like something had been breathing behind it. Downstairs, the house buzzed with investigators and engineers. A structural specialist from the city, a man named Lionel Spears, arrived with blueprints that didn't match the current house. "This plan's from 1935, he said, laying it out on the dining table. Originally, there was a root cellar beneath the kitchen, then a service corridor, common in houses like this back then, used by workers to move without crossing the main floor. But it's not there now?" Rachel asked. Spears shook his head. "Blueprint says it was sealed in the 1950s during a renovation. But if someone unsealed it, you'd never know, especially with that much crawl space under the flooring." Detective Briggs leaned over the plans. "Any entry point?" "Depends what they left behind. Might be under the basement slab. Might be behind a false wall. These ducts don't match either. They were rerouted in the 70s for central air. Whoever did it just capped the old lines." Rachel felt her chest tighten. The capped lines. The vent Clara had always said made strange sounds. She remembered something else. Clara's drawings. Back at the motel, Rachel dug through the file box she'd filled with schoolwork and papers. She found them in a pink folder labeled Clara's Art. There were dozens. Crayon masterpieces of cats, rainbows, scribbled shapes she claimed were unicorns. But near the bottom were 5 drawings Rachel hadn't seen before. She spread them on the motel bed, heart beginning to race. Each was a floor plan, rough and childish, but unmistakable. The first was the house as it appeared: kitchen, stairs, bedrooms. The second had extra doors, hidden ones, hallways that didn't exist. One doorway led through the wall between the kitchen and the laundry room. Clara had labeled it in backwards letters: "Mommy's not allowed." The third showed a narrow staircase spiraling underground. On the next page, she'd drawn a room, tiny, all pink, one bed, no windows. A figure inside it, drawn with wide black circles for eyes. She'd written her name beneath the figure: Clara. Rachel's hands trembled. The final drawing was the most detailed. It was the dollhouse. Each room had been replicated exactly, including their own. Even the wallpaper matched, but one room, bottom right, wasn't in their home. It had red walls, a wooden chair, a camera on a tripod, and something that looked like a vent. Clara had written in big letters above it: "The watching room." Rachel brought the drawings to Detective Briggs. They sat together in the police conference room, the papers spread between them. Briggs studied them like blueprints. Alvarez hovered nearby, silent. "She saw things we didn't," Briggs murmured. "These aren't imagined. She didn't make this up." "She said he told her it was a map," Rachel whispered. Briggs tapped her pen on the watching room. "He didn't just keep her hidden. He made her study the house." "Why?" "To learn the rules, or to break them." Rachel closed her eyes. "She used to say the walls were whispering. I thought it was just a child's imagination. But she heard him." That evening, Briggs ordered a new ground-penetrating radar scan of the home's foundation. Within hours, they found anomalies beneath the southern end of the basement, solid voids that suggested space, but no entrance. Rachel watched from behind the police line as workers drilled through the concrete. Inch by inch, the bit chewed through, revealing dry air on the other side. The moment they broke through, the smell hit them: dampness, decay, and something sweet, like candy left too long in a sealed car. Briggs knelt beside the hole and peered in with a flashlight. Then she froze. "What is it?" Rachel asked, stepping forward. The detective didn't answer. She reached into the hole with tongs and pulled something out. $1, hand-stitched, dressed in tiny pajamas. Rachel's throat closed. The doll wore the same outfit Clara had worn to bed the night she disappeared. The basement team expanded the hole into a crawl-sized opening. A remote camera was snaked inside, revealing a narrow passage, about 3 feet tall and 10 feet long, leading to a small sealed room. Inside the room, a miniature desk, piles of toys, and a camera rig bolted to a tripod. A second doll sat in the corner, facing the wall. It wore a red flannel shirt. "That's my shirt," Thomas whispered from behind them. Rachel turned. "You gave her that shirt. It was a hand-me-down. She liked that it was mine." They all stared at the monitor. No movement. No Clara. But then the tech running the remote camera leaned forward. "Wait. What's that?" On the far wall, beside the mattress, was a line of crayon markings, tallies. Dozens of them. Rows and rows. Rachel counted. 322. She was keeping track of the days, Briggs said. Rachel's knees gave way. Briggs caught her. They didn't find Clara in the hidden room, but they did find something else. Behind the mattress, beneath a loose tile, lay another cassette tape. This one had a crude label written in crayon. "Don't listen if you're scared." The tape was rushed to evidence and transferred that same night. Rachel sat in the darkened police conference room with headphones over her ears. She listened as Clara's voice filled the space again. "He says we're family now. Says the dollhouse is better than outside. I try to remember what outside looks like, but sometimes I forget. Static. I think Mommy is looking for me. I feel it. I drew maps for her. I left notes in the pipes. More static. I don't know what day it is, but I'm still here. I'm still me. Please find me before I'm not." Rachel took off the headphones and cried. Later that night, alone in her motel bed, Rachel stared at the ceiling. She imagined Clara in a dark pink room, staring at a dollhouse, being told the world outside no longer existed, being told her parents had forgotten her. But Clara hadn't given in. She had drawn maps, left tapes, counted days. Rachel wiped her tears and whispered into the darkness, "I haven't forgotten you. I never will." The next morning the sun rose pale behind low clouds. Mist clung to the trees outside the Holloway house, casting long shadows across the lawn. It was the first day without rain since Clara disappeared, but the world felt no lighter. Detective Briggs returned before sunrise with structural engineers and a team of forensic anthropologists. The sealed room beneath the basement had been excavated overnight. What they found inside was photographed, bagged, and logged. Still no Clara, but the clues were growing darker. Briggs reviewed them one by one. The doll in Clara's clothes, the crayon-marked wall, the tripod and camera setup, a worn piece of duct tape on the mattress with Clara's name written on it in block letters, and one more detail that hadn't yet been shared with Rachel. Behind the camera, the forensics team had found the frame of a second door, bolted shut from the inside, leading deeper into the foundation. The door had been recently sealed. Fresh screws, new caulking. Someone had hidden it deliberately. Someone still in the house. Rachel arrived at the scene just as Briggs emerged from the basement. Her face was grim. "You're keeping something from me," Rachel said. Briggs didn't deny it. "Because if I told you what we found, you'd never leave this house again, and until it's safe, I can't have that on my conscience." Rachel's voice cracked. "She's in there, isn't she?" Briggs looked away for a moment. "I think so, but I don't think she's alone." While the officers planned the next stage of the excavation, Rachel moved through the house on her own. She wandered Clara's room, the kitchen, the hallway, and then she found herself in the laundry room. The air was cooler than before, stale. The access panel behind the machines had been left unscrewed after the initial search. A faint draft blew from the opening, dry and sour, tinged with metal. Rachel crouched. She stared into the black square of the duct, heart pounding. A whisper of movement brushed the back of her neck, an instinct more than a sound. She reached forward and placed her hand flat on the vent floor. Something was there. Her fingers closed around an object. She pulled it out, a folded piece of notebook paper, stained with something dark and brittle. Inside, a child's drawing, Clara's handwriting. It was a sketch of a box labeled "Furnace," with arrows leading beneath it. Rachel rushed to Briggs. "We never checked under the furnace." Briggs frowned. "It's bolted to the concrete slab. That room was built around it. There's no crawlspace access." Rachel unfolded the note again. "Unless someone made one." Within the hour, the furnace was disconnected and removed by fire department technicians. What lay beneath it made everyone in the room go silent. A trap door. It wasn't part of the foundation blueprints. It wasn't even visible until the furnace had been completely lifted. A metal ring embedded in the wood. New hinges. Briggs shined a flashlight down. "Stairs, narrow, hand-cut." She ordered all non-essential personnel out of the room. Tactical gear was prepped. Radios were checked. Officers stood at the ready. "Rachel," Briggs said, turning to her, "you can't go down there." Rachel didn't argue, but her fists were clenched, her entire body straining against the pull to follow. As the team descended into the trap door, she stood just outside the threshold, staring down into the dark. The smell rising from the hole made her gag. Mildew. Dirt. Something. Rancid. And beneath it all, faint but undeniable, was the unmistakable scent of shampoo, the kind she used in Clara's bath every night. The crawl space stretched longer than anyone expected. The team followed the passage for over 30 feet beneath the foundation. The tunnel was reinforced with old wood beams and lined with deteriorating insulation. Wires hung in places, chewed and dead. Strange holes opened at angles along the path. Some led into the HVAC system, others into duct chutes and shadowed crawl spaces. It was a maze, a built-in spider web. At the end of the tunnel, they found another room, this one smaller. Inside was a replica of Clara's bedroom, recreated in miniature. Same color walls, same style bed, a small dresser, a rug, even a closet. And in the center of the room stood a dollhouse, nearly 4 feet tall. It was identical to the Holloway home. Every room, every hallway, even the newly discovered basement trap door was carved in. But one room had been added, at the very bottom, just beneath the dollhouse's version of Clara's room. It had red walls, a pink bed, a door with a tiny lock, and inside it, a single doll slumped over. The doll wore Clara's real pajamas, but the doll's face had been peeled away, revealing a second face beneath, a porcelain one, cracked and smiling. Rachel waited in the living room while the team returned. Briggs was the last one out. Her gloves were stained. Her flashlight flickered. "Did you find her?" Rachel asked. Briggs knelt down in front of her. "Number, but she's been down there, recently." Rachel gripped the edge of the couch. "How do you know?" Briggs held up a plastic hair clip, blue, shaped like a butterfly. "Found it under the dollhouse, still warm to the touch." That night, Rachel couldn't sleep. She lay in the motel bed with Clara's drawings spread across the sheets, tracing them with her fingers over and over again. The shapes, the arrows, the notes. And then she noticed something new. In the corner of one drawing, a doodle she'd always dismissed as scribbles, was a name, barely legible. Mr. Buttons. Rachel's blood ran cold. She didn't recognize the name, but Clara had written it in the corner of her own room next to her bed. A label, a presence, a watcher. At 3:15 a.m., her phone rang. It was Briggs. "Something just happened," the detective said. "You need to come back to the house." Rachel threw on clothes and drove through the mist-choked streets. When she arrived, the front door was wide open, police tape torn. Briggs met her on the porch, flashlight in hand. "Security feed picked up motion in the basement," she said. "Cameras went black right after. I don't think we're alone in this house anymore." They entered cautiously, lights sweeping across the floor. In the center of the living room, placed carefully on the rug, was another dollhouse. Smaller this time, but freshly built. Not dusty, not old. It hadn't been there before. Briggs lifted the roof and opened the side. Inside were 6 rooms, all dark, except one, a miniature bedroom painted pink, and inside it, on a tiny mattress, was a new doll. She had blonde yarn hair, blue felt eyes, and a small piece of paper pinned to her chest. Rachel picked it up with shaking fingers. It read, "Clara sleeps here now. Do not disturb her." The dollhouse was placed like a threat. It sat in the middle of the Holloway's living room, pristine, fresh, and somehow intentional. It hadn't been there hours ago. No doors were forced open, no cameras saw anyone enter. And yet it stood, squarely on the rug where Clara used to build pillow forts. Rachel stared at it. Everything in her recoiled. This wasn't a toy. It was a message. Briggs crouched beside it and put on gloves. "No fingerprints," she muttered after a quick inspection. "Just like the others." She opened the side panels of the miniature structure. 6 rooms, each no larger than a shoebox. The same layout as the Holloway home: master bedroom, Clara's room, hallway, kitchen, laundry, and basement. All painstakingly replicated. Same wallpaper patterns, same furniture types. Even the chipped tile behind the laundry sink had been copied. But Clara's bedroom was different, brighter, cleaner. The bed was perfectly made. A tiny pink nightlight sat on the miniature nightstand, painted with a red marker smile. And there, Lying on the bed was the doll. Blonde yarn hair, felt eyes, a sewn pink mouth, pinned to her chest. "Clara sleeps here now. Do not disturb her." Briggs turned to Rachel. "This is escalating." Rachel's voice was thin. "He's playing." "No," Briggs said. "He's watching, and he wants you to know it." Forensics took the dollhouse to evidence. The paper note was preserved, the glue and fibers tested. No usable prints. The handwriting was blocky, almost childlike, but the phrasing, "do not disturb her," wasn't a child's voice. Rachel sat with Thomas on the motel bed later that night, going over every moment of the past week. "Think," she whispered. "Has anything ever happened before Clara disappeared that made you feel like something was wrong with this house?" Thomas didn't look at her. He was shaking. "2 weeks ago," he said quietly, "I heard footsteps in the attic." Rachel looked at him, stunned. "At first I thought it was just the wind. But then, I was in Clara's room, cleaning up her books, and I heard footsteps directly above me. Slow, like someone pacing. Why didn't you say anything?" "I didn't want to scare you." "You didn't want to scare me." His voice cracked. "I didn't want to believe it." The next morning, Rachel returned to the house alone. The front door had been resealed. Crime scene tape hung slack across the porch. A cruiser idled nearby, but the officer inside barely glanced up as she approached. She didn't go inside. Not yet. Instead, she circled the house slowly, inspecting every wall, every vent, every window. The house looked normal from the outside, charming even. But as she reached the east wall, near Clara's bedroom, she noticed something she hadn't before. An air vent at ground level, half covered by ivy. She knelt and peeled back the vines. The vent had been modified, reinforced with wire mesh, a locking clasp, and something else, a smear of dark brown, just above the frame. She touched it, sticky, dried. Blood? That afternoon, Briggs arranged for another search, this time using thermal imaging drones. They flew low over the house, capturing heat signatures inside the walls. Most readings were expected: insulation, wiring, appliance hums. But one result stood out. Behind Clara's bedroom wall, about 6 feet up, a warm zone the size of a person. Stationary, faint, but there. Rachel stood beside Briggs in the command van, watching the scan on screen. "That's her," Rachel whispered. Briggs didn't look away. Or someone else. With a tactical team assembled, officers began removing the drywall in Clara's room. They peeled it away layer by layer, first insulation, then wood slats, then, behind it all, a false wall built from plywood, painted over to match the room. Invisible from the outside, behind that, a narrow passage, barely wide enough to crawl through. A passage that curved down, then opened into a wider space. Inside that space, another dollhouse. Larger this time, more elaborate. Rachel stepped forward, ignoring the calls to stay back. She dropped to her knees and stared into the opening. The dollhouse was nearly 4 feet tall, 6 feet wide. It sat on a wooden table bolted to the floor. Around it were jars of paint, glue bottles, carving tools. Someone had built this in the darkness. The rooms inside were the same, but with differences. The hallway walls were painted darker. The kitchen had a scorch mark on the tile, just like the real one had after a toaster fire 6 months ago. And in the master bedroom, a new detail. A Rachel doll. She lay in a replica of Rachel's bed, dressed in pajamas with tiny, ink-stained cuffs, just like the real ones. Rachel reached inside and picked up the doll. Underneath it, hidden beneath the pillow, was a slip of paper. "She watches you like I do." Back at the motel, Rachel stared at the doll for hours. She ran her thumb across the stitched mouth, the yarn hair, the small black bead eyes. Was Clara making these? Or had she been taught to? Conditioned. That night, Rachel dreamed of the dollhouse. In her dream, she was inside it. Every room matched her memory, but slightly off. The angles were tighter. The air smelled of wood glue and old carpet. She moved from room to room, calling Clara's name, but the house shifted. Doors disappeared. Walls changed position. The basement stairs led back to the attic. She heard breathing in the walls. Not Clara's. His. She turned and saw a face behind the vent, pale, smiling, and watching. Rachel woke up gasping. Sweat soaked the sheets. Her heart pounded against her ribs like fists on a locked door. She looked to her side. Thomas's spot was empty. She sat up, checked the clock, 3:42 a.m. The bathroom door was ajar. Light spilled out. "Thomas," she called. No answer. She crept to the door. It was empty. No running water. No clothes on the hanger. Just a note taped to the mirror. Handwritten in block letters. He's with her now. Stay out of the walls. Rachel's hands trembled as she pulled the note from the mirror. He's with her now. Stay out of the walls. No signature, no fingerprints. Just the message. Chilling, deliberate, and personal. The bathroom light flickered overhead, casting her reflection in warped flashes. Rachel turned to the door, but the hallway was empty. Thomas's keys were gone. His bag, his coat. And so was he. She didn't call his name. Somewhere deep inside, she knew. He wasn't coming back. Not yet. She sat down on the edge of the motel bed and stared at the dollhouse replica on the dresser. It was the second one Briggs hadn't taken. She'd asked to keep it, not for sentiment, for pattern. Because each version, the original dollhouse, the new one, the hidden one, wasn't just a copy of the house. It was a message in rooms, a language. Rachel moved toward the replica and opened the hinged side panels again. She studied each room in silence. The living room. Inside, 2 dolls stood beside the couch. One was clearly Rachel. The other was missing. Only the feet remained, snapped at the ankles. Blood painted on the wall in careful red streaks. The kitchen. Pristine. No food, no dishes. Just a doll-sized refrigerator with a tiny plastic chain around its handle. The oven door was slightly open, and inside, a small figure curled into the fetal position. A child? Number no face. The hallway, empty. Only one detail stood out. Above the miniature vent on the floor, a red circle had been painted around it. A symbol Rachel didn't recognize. Something like a spiral with eyes at both ends. The laundry room, a door, $1, and a folded paper in the washer drum. Rachel pried it free with tweezers and unfolded it. 3 words. She still remembers. Rachel's pulse surged. She opened the last panel. The basement. It was a mirror of the trap-door room they'd uncovered under the furnace. The same dollhouse within a dollhouse. The same mattress. But now, there was a new addition. A thin silver wire stretched from the ceiling to the floor. And tied to the wire, barely larger than a fingertip, was a doll with brown hair. Not Clara, not Rachel, not anyone from the house, but someone else. Someone who hadn't been found. Rachel rushed the dollhouse to the station. She burst into Briggs' office, the replica in her arms, the wire-wrapped doll still dangling inside. Briggs stood immediately. "Where'd you find that?" "In my motel room. Thomas is gone. He left a note, or someone left it for him. I don't know anymore." Rachel placed the dollhouse on the table and opened it. Briggs studied each room in silence. When she reached the basement, she paused. "That's not Clara." "I know." Briggs nodded to herself. "Then he's done this before." She called in Alvarez. The 3 of them sat in the dimly lit room as photos of the doll were taken, measurements logged, paint samples lifted. Briggs turned to Rachel. "We found something else. Something we didn't tell you earlier." Rachel's voice was flat. "Why am I not surprised?" Briggs leaned forward. "When we scanned the crawl space, We found evidence of decomposition, not human. At least not that we could confirm without exhumation. But something was buried behind the wall years ago. Where? The far west corner, between Clara's room and the back porch. Rachel stood. Take me there. The house was quiet when they returned. The front door creaked open under Rachel's hand. She stepped into the silence like a diver stepping into deep water. Her breath caught. The place felt watched. She led Briggs and Alvarez to the back hallway. The panel they'd removed 2 days earlier was still off. Behind it, the crawl space gaped open. Rachel ducked and crawled inside. She moved slowly, the flashlight beam cutting through the dark, illuminating dust and insulation clinging to every beam. The smell was worse now. Old earth, mildew, rusted metal, and something else. She reached the far corner and saw it. A disturbed patch of dirt, slightly mounded. Briggs caught up behind her. We'll need to log it. But Rachel was already digging. Bare hands clawed at the dirt. Splinters cut her knuckles, but she didn't stop. Not until her fingers struck something solid. Wood. A box, no bigger than a bread pan. She pulled it free. The nails were rusted. The lid half loose. She opened it. Inside, a miniature face mask, carved from wood. Painted white, red cheeks, button eyes sewn into sockets with black thread. A smile stretched across its lower half, wide, unnatural. It was a mask made for a doll, but it was too detailed, too human. Briggs knelt beside her. What is that? Rachel turned it in her hands. Carved on the back, a single name etched in slanted letters. Mr. Buttons. Rachel's breath hitched. That's what Clara called him. I found the name in her drawings. Briggs was already calling it in. They sealed the mask in an evidence bag and backed out of the crawl space. As Rachel stood up in the hallway, something fell from above. She flinched. It was a scrap of paper. She bent to pick it up. In a child's scrawl, "He wears a different face when I'm awake." That night, back at the motel, Rachel didn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, at the lamp, at the wall. Every shadow seemed to breathe. Every creak in the building felt like a footstep above her head. Thomas still hadn't called. She kept dialing, straight to voicemail. At 2:22 a.m., her motel phone rang. She answered it on the first ring. Static. Then silence. Then a child's whisper. "He told me you'd stop." Click. In the morning, Rachel returned to the house again, alone. The police had come and gone. Briggs was reviewing older missing persons cases, trying to match the unknown doll. Alvarez had gone off shift. The house had been left locked, but Rachel still had her key. She moved from room to room in silence. First the kitchen, then the hallway, then Clara's room. She stopped in front of the vent. This time, it was open, and inside, carefully positioned, was a new note. Rachel reached in with shaking fingers. She unfolded it slowly. "The dollhouse is almost done. One more room to build." Beneath the words, a crude drawing. A woman. On her knees, face carved into a smile, hands bound in thread, and beneath her, the words, "Mother." The drawing shook in Rachel's hands. A crude sketch. Lines thick with pressure, paper dented where the pencil had dug too deep. The figure was unmistakably female. Yarn hair, cross-hatched eyes, thread for wrists. The mouth was jagged, wide, and stitched into a forced smile. Underneath it, just one word, "Mother." Rachel stared at it for a long time, before folding it and tucking it into her coat pocket. She stood in Clara's bedroom, surrounded by the residue of nightmares, dollhouses, hidden vents, and things that whispered when no one else was listening. The floor beneath her feet creaked softly, but nothing moved. She was alone. For now. Back at the station, Briggs looked exhausted. Her hair was pulled back in a rough ponytail, and she hadn't changed clothes since yesterday. Crime scene photos from the crawl space and the third dollhouse covered the whiteboard. Every image showed something built to last. Precision carpentry, intricate design. Someone had taken their time. "This isn't just a crime scene," she said, handing Rachel a cup of coffee. "It's architecture." Rachel sipped without tasting. "You think he's still inside the house?" Briggs didn't answer right away. Instead, she tapped the whiteboard where the false wall had been found. "Every time we open a new wall, he's already one step ahead, like he's watching from the other side." Rachel didn't ask how. She already knew. Briggs continued. "We brought in county records. No permits were ever filed for renovations. That furnace room? Not on file. The vent modifications? Not on blueprints. And that trapdoor?" She shook her head. "No documentation, no logic. It's as if the house rewrote itself." Rachel sat forward. "What about previous owners?" "We've found 3. None stayed longer than a year. 1 died in an accident. 1 moved states without explanation. The last owner flipped the house after 6 months and disappeared." "Children?" Rachel asked. Briggs nodded. 2 of those owners had kids, both missing. 1 girl in 1979, a boy in 2002. Their cases were unsolved. Rachel whispered. "They were taken too." Briggs looked at her. "And now Clara's the 3rd. That afternoon, Rachel met with a city archivist named Lena Marks. They sat in a cramped room at the Historical Society, surrounded by yellowed maps and brittle building ledgers. Rachel explained what had happened in broad strokes: missing child, hidden spaces, altered floor plans. Lena nodded slowly. "That house was built in 1911, she said. "It's seen a lot. We have original blueprints, unrenovated. You'll want those." She brought out a rolled scroll of aged paper, then slowly unfurled it across the table. Rachel's eyes scanned it hungrily. The layout matched what she remembered, but one room stood out. A small square beneath the kitchen. "What's this?" she asked, pointing. Lena adjusted her glasses. "Servant quarters, removed during a 1953 remodel. They were known as quiet rooms, no windows, stone floors, used to isolate noise." Rachel felt cold bloom in her stomach. "It's still there." She returned to the house just before dusk. The sun was low and pale behind clouded glass, casting a yellow hue over the porch. The tape on the front door had been cut again, but this time not by police. Inside, the air felt different, heavier. Rachel moved quietly through the hallway, the floor moaning underfoot. She stopped at the entrance to the kitchen. A new item sat on the counter. A doll's head, just the head, no body. 1 button eye missing, replaced by a metal tack. Its mouth was sewn shut with black thread. Next to it, a note. Rachel unfolded it slowly. "You're almost finished, but so is she." She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she returned to the blueprints Lena had given her. The original layout clearly showed the quiet room, an isolated space roughly 10 feet by 10 feet, accessible by a narrow service stair. The modern plans showed nothing. Rachel remembered Clara's crayon drawing, the spiral staircase. "She was trying to show me," Rachel whispered. There had to be a hidden entrance, and only one place in the kitchen matched the room's dimensions and depth, beneath the old pantry. The next morning, Rachel returned with Alvarez and 2 officers from Briggs' team. They brought sonar equipment, small drills, and hand lights. Rachel led them to the pantry. "Remove the floorboards," she said. It took less than 20 minutes. Beneath the boards, a second layer of rotted planks. And beneath that, a trapdoor, identical in design to the one under the furnace, rusty handle, screwed shut. Alvarez looked at her. "You sure?" Rachel nodded once. He pried the trapdoor open. Cold air poured out, not musty like before. This air was wet, almost humid, like something had been breathing inside it. Rachel descended first, flashlight in hand. The others followed. The narrow staircase spiraled down for over 10 feet, then ended in a low ceiling chamber. Concrete walls, no windows, a drain in the center of the floor, and against the far wall, a mirror, full length, cracked down the center. Rachel stepped toward it. Her reflection blinked back at her, warped by the split glass. But behind her reflection, something moved. She turned. Nothing. Just the wall. Until Alvarez spotted it. A latch in the baseboard, camouflaged in the molding. He twisted it. A section of the wall swung open. Inside, a crawl space, lined with insulation and plastic sheeting. And in the middle, barely breathing, was Thomas. They pulled him out gently. He was malnourished, dehydrated, shaking. His clothes were dirty, his eyes red. But he was alive. Rachel knelt beside him. "Where's Clara?" she whispered. He couldn't speak. He lifted one hand and pointed toward the mirror, then passed out. They carried Thomas up and rushed him to the hospital. Rachel stayed behind. She sat on the kitchen floor, staring at the mirror now removed from the wall. The glass shimmered in the low light. A message had been scrawled in the dust, barely visible until she breathed on it. One room left. Beneath it, a crude drawing. A square, a chair, a camera, a doll with its back turned. And beneath that, a smile carved in wood. The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and iron. Thomas lay motionless on the bed, hooked to fluids, a monitor beeping steadily at his side. His eyes fluttered beneath closed lids. When Rachel entered, his fingers twitched. He tried to speak, but no words came. Rachel gripped his hand and leaned close. "I found the mirror. I found the room. We're close," she whispered. "But I need to know what you saw." His eyes opened slowly. He didn't speak. Instead, he pointed to the ceiling. Rachel followed his gesture, confused. There was nothing up there, just white panels, a vent in the center. Then she remembered. The HVAC system. The ducts. Back at the Holloway house, Rachel and Briggs stood in the attic, boots crunching over ancient insulation. The crawlspace ductwork crisscrossed above their heads. Old aluminum tubes, some capped, some still active. Briggs held the new thermal scanner up to a side vent. "Something's radiating heat," she said. "Could be a small animal, or..." Rachel was already unscrewing the panel. She braced herself. The cover came loose with a soft metallic groan. Behind it, darkness. Then, a glint of color. Briggs angled her flashlight. They both froze. A second doll, wedged inside the duct. Not just placed, stuffed. Its legs were bent unnaturally. Its head was tilted to the side. And its face. Its face looked exactly like the HVAC technician who had inspected the system a week earlier. The one who never returned. They pulled the doll free and examined it in the daylight. The resemblance was disturbing. Same uniform, same stubble, stitched with thread. Same laminated name tag. Robbie, printed in miniature across the chest. "He's not answering calls," Briggs muttered. "We thought he left town." Rachel turned the doll over. There was a slit along its spine. Briggs hesitated, then opened it. Inside, a folded strip of Polaroid film. No photo, just a handwritten message in red ink. "The ducks are just veins. The house is alive. Keep crawling," Rachel whispered. "He's watching through the walls." They traced the duct line through the blueprints. It ran from the attic to Clara's room, then down behind the laundry chute and into the sealed crawl space beneath the pantry. A perfect loop. Briggs tapped the map. If someone lived in this system, they could travel the house without ever being seen. Rachel sat back, dizzy. He doesn't just watch. He moves. That night, she returned to the motel room and found another dollhouse waiting on the bed. Smaller, cruder, but unmistakable. It showed only one room. A basement, windowless with a single chair. Inside the chair, bound by thread, was a new doll. Blonde yarn hair, stitched eyes, pajamas with little stars. Rachel reached for it with trembling hands. It was Clara. This time her hands were stitched to her lap. Her mouth had been sewn into a smile, but the threads were fraying, as if pulled apart by tiny teeth. Pinned beneath the doll, another note. "You're late." Rachel drove back to the house at 1:13 a.m. She didn't call Briggs. She didn't wait. She parked in front of the house and stepped into the shadows with a flashlight and nothing else. Inside, the floor was cold, still. The air had that same unnatural sweetness, like candy left in a coffin. She moved through the hallway in silence. No creaks, no whispers. She passed the living room, stopped. There was a new object on the couch, a camera, old, a VHS camcorder, still warm to the touch. Rachel lifted it and pressed rewind. The whir of the tape filled the room. She hit play. The screen showed static, then movement. A small room, stone walls, pink bed. A child in the corner, Clara. She was curled in a blanket, her face half lit by a red light. She wasn't crying. She wasn't moving. She was watching something, a dollhouse. She was watching herself. Then, behind her on the tape, something moved in the shadows. A man, faceless, thin, crawling through the wall. The screen went black. Then text appeared. "I gave her a home. You gave her silence." Rachel screamed and threw the camera. It shattered against the floor. From above her, a thump. She looked up. The attic. She ran for the stairs. The attic door was ajar. She pushed it open. Silence. Then movement. She lifted her flashlight. And there, just inside the crawlspace vent, a human hand. Gray skin, long fingers, pulling something backward into the dark. Rachel lunged. She grabbed at the object being dragged. It was Clara's pajama top, still warm, still alive. Then the hand slipped away, vanishing into the duct. Rachel crawled forward, forcing herself into the narrow shaft. The aluminum walls pressed against her arms. Her shoulders scraped. She pushed forward anyway. 10 feet in, 15. Then, another opening. A hollow behind the insulation. She slipped through and gasped. It was a room. Not on any blueprint. No door, no windows, just insulation, wiring, and the skeleton of the house. But inside it, a mattress, a child's books, a tiny toilet, and a live feed camera pointing to the bed. Rachel crawled closer. The bed was still warm. A strand of blonde hair clung to the pillow. Clara had just been here. Rachel reached for the camera. The red light blinked. Recording. She turned it off. The feed was going somewhere. She followed the cord. Through the wall, behind insulation, into darkness, and that's when she saw it. A mask, hanging on the far beam, white, wooden, 2 button eyes, a carved smile. Mr. Buttons, and next to it, etched in black marker on the wall, "One more doll. Then we're done." The mask stared at her. Painted white, its button eyes uneven and too wide apart. The mouth was the worst, grooved into the wood in a stretched, unnatural smile. A predator's smile. A liar's smile. Rachel couldn't move. Her breath came shallow, rattling in her throat. She reached out and touched the edge of the mask. It was warm, not from the attic heat, from skin. Someone had worn it recently. Beneath it, nailed to the beam, was another drawing. Not a note, not a child's scribble, but a schematic, a layout of the house. But not the version in the blueprints, not the one from city archives. This version included rooms no official map had, passages, vents, tunnels beneath the foundation, and at the bottom corner, a red circle, a label, root. Rachel's pulse surged. It wasn't a dollhouse anymore. It was a system, a living map of how he moved. She took a photo of the schematic and backed out of the crawl space. Briggs met her on the front porch minutes later, lights from the patrol cruiser still strobing the front lawn. Rachel showed her the photo. Briggs stiffened. "We thought we'd cleared all the underground spaces." Rachel shook her head. "He's beneath the floor, all the way beneath. He's still using vents, but this is where he built it." Briggs radioed in for backup. The tactical team returned with ground-penetrating radar. They focused on the area labeled Root. It was under the original foundation slab, pre-1950s construction. Untouched by modern renovation, the radar scanned it. One signal returned, a cavity roughly 12 feet below the surface. Briggs stared at the monitor. "It's a room!" Excavation began that night. A crew of officers tore up the living room floor plank by plank, exposing the soil beneath. Layers of dirt gave way to rock, then to poured concrete. A jackhammer cracked it open, and underneath, a wooden trap door, identical in design to the others. Briggs, Alvarez, and Rachel stood above it, flashlights poised. Alvarez unscrewed the bolts. The trap creaked open with a groan, like a breath escaping from lungs that hadn't filled in years. A metal ladder descended into darkness. Briggs took point. Rachel followed. The descent was narrow, earth-packed and lined with rotted support beams. The tunnel twisted downward, unnatural in design, like it had grown rather than been dug. The floor leveled out after 20 feet. A corridor opened before them, low-ceilinged and claustrophobic. The walls were covered in dolls, hundreds of them, tied with string, stapled to beams, propped in corners, all hand-sewn, all wearing tiny replicas of real clothes. Some Rachel recognized. One wore Thomas's old necktie. Another had her own scarf stitched around its neck, and all of them were smiling. They reached the final chamber. Rachel's light swept across it. A workshop, tables, carpentry tools, dolls in various stages of construction, shelves of miniature wallpaper rolls, pins, eyeballs in jars. At the center, a replica of the Holloway house, more detailed than any of the others. Every room was wired with tiny bulbs. Each window contained an image, miniature photos of the real house taken from hidden cameras. In the attic, in the vents. In Clara's room. Rachel moved slowly toward it, heart pounding. In the basement replica of the dollhouse was a room she hadn't seen before. A mirror room. She looked up. Across the dirt chamber, hidden in shadow, was the real one. Same dimensions, same layout. A glass panel against the far wall reflected them back in fractured lines. And just beyond it, a chair, heavy, bolted to the ground. Child-sized, straps dangled from the arms and legs. Rachel stepped forward, a sound scuffling to her right. Alvarez spun. Movement! Briggs raised her light. From the shadows emerged Clara. She stood barefoot, trembling, her nightgown torn and her cheeks streaked with dust. Rachel dropped everything and ran to her. Clara didn't speak. She just clung to her mother like a child falling through a dream. Behind her, the wall moved. A panel slid open. A man stepped out. Tall, thin, shirtless. His face was covered by the Mr. Buttons mask. Briggs aimed her weapon. Hands where I can see them. But he didn't raise them. He stood motionless, then turned, and vanished back into the wall. Briggs pursued. Alvarez followed. Rachel held Clara tighter. "You're safe now," she whispered. But Clara shook her head. "No," she whispered. "He's not done building." Upstairs, the officers scoured the house, but the masked man was gone, disappeared into the ducts again. Back underground, Rachel carried Clara up the ladder. When they reached daylight, the girl blinked against it, as if sunlight was a foreign language. She was alive, but her eyes were hollow. She clung to Rachel with one hand, and to something else in the other. Rachel looked down. Clara held a new doll. It wore a small replica of Rachel's blue blouse. and it had a sewn-on label across its chest. Mother. Final. Clara didn't speak for hours. Wrapped in a blanket at the hospital, she sat beside Rachel with glassy eyes, fingers clenched around the doll labeled Mother. Final. A nurse tried gently to take it from her once, but Clara gripped it tighter, as if letting go would make something worse happen. Rachel never pushed. Instead, she watched. She waited. She whispered to her daughter like they were still in the old house, on quiet nights after stories, after nightmares. "You're safe now," she repeated. But inside, she wasn't sure she believed it, because Clara's eyes kept drifting upward, to the ceiling tiles, the vents, like she could still hear him. Briggs and Alvarez spent the rest of the night sealing every access point in the Holloway house. Ducts were welded shut, crawl spaces reinforced. The sub-foundation chamber was cordoned off, cataloged, and photographed. They hadn't found the man, but they'd found what he'd left behind. Over 200 dolls, all hand-sewn, all patterned after real people. Many wore replicas of clothing from missing persons cases dating back decades. Some had names stitched into their backs, first names only. Others had photographs pinned to their torsos, miniature and curled from age. One doll had a driver's license face taped over the button eyes. It was Robbie, the HVAC technician. They began matching the dolls to case files. By morning, they'd identified 7 cold cases that overlapped with the layout of the dollhouses. Each one had lived in a home with an older HVAC or crawlspace system. All were presumed runaways or accidents. None had been connected before. Briggs called in a profiler. He took one look at the evidence and said, "You're not dealing with a killer, not just. This is a collector." Rachel stood nearby, arms crossed. "He's not collecting trophies," she said. "He's building a family." What they found was a perfect replica of Clara's room, built from plywood and salvaged hospital furniture. Even the bed sheets matched. The room was dimly lit by strings of Christmas lights stapled to the walls, powered by extension cords running through the vents. In the center of the bed, a new dollhouse, smaller than the others. Handmade, still unfinished. Some rooms were bare wood. Others had been painted, carpeted, furnished with glue-stuck plastic figurines. And in the corner room, a single doll. Rachel, bound at the arms, mouth sewn closed, eyes wide open, pinned to her chest, a note written in smeared graphite. "You made her wait. Now you will." Rachel stood in the doorway, staring at the replica. The real Clara was upstairs, asleep, safe. But this room wasn't about her. It was about Rachel, her guilt, her silence, her failure to see what was creeping through the seams of her life. Briggs stepped beside her. "He's trying to punish you." Rachel's voice was low. "He already did." Briggs nodded to the dollhouse. "This ends tonight." Forensics swept the shaft chamber and recovered fragments of burned blueprints, voice recorders, and one final camera, still warm. But no man, no footsteps, no trace of escape. Briggs turned to Rachel. "He's not in the house anymore. He's using infrastructure, hospitals, schools, malls, anywhere with walls, ducts, basements." Rachel whispered, "Anywhere with rooms." 3 days later, Rachel brought Clara home to a new address. Somewhere with no basement, no vents large enough to crawl through, no crawl spaces, no false panels. She bought a dog, installed cameras, slept with the lights on. Still, some nights, she'd wake up and find Clara sitting upright, whispering to the doll. The same one, the one labeled Mother Final. One night, Rachel sat beside her and asked what she was saying. Clara answered without turning her head. "He's still talking." 2 months later, Briggs called with an update. The lab had reconstructed audio from one of the miniature speaker devices in the doll found under Rachel's motel bed. Hidden inside a corrupted digital file was a sequence of clicks and tones, computer-generated, encoded speech. They ran it through audio analysis software. It decoded to one sentence. There are other houses. The story didn't make the national news. Too strange, too fragmented. No confirmed suspect. No name, no face. Just a string of missing children over 4 decades. No bodies, only dolls. Rachel tried to move on. She focused on Clara, therapy, stability. But every time she heard a noise in the wall, every creak, every groan, she froze. Because the house didn't feel like it belonged to them anymore. It felt like someone else was still watching. Epilogue. The crawl space. 6 months later. Outside Sacramento, California. A new family moved into a 1920s fixer-upper. They had 2 children, a dog, and plans to turn the attic into a studio. While cleaning the HVAC duct in the hallway, the father found something lodged deep behind the filter. A dollar, dressed in blue, smiling, pinned to its chest. "You're next."